for me in high school, it was the strict ones. Well, sort of. But, uh, two teachers really stood out to me in high school. The Filipino teacher, Ginang Laranas, and our history teacher, Mr. Flynn. Ginang Laranas, for her passion, she was one of the most passionate teachers we ever, like I had ever met. One of the most caring as well. Um, and like even to this day, we still talk. You know, I remember running into her in the mall one time, and she was like, "Oh, what are you doing with your life now?" And I was like, "I'm a teacher of all things." And then she started talking like, "Oh yeah, this is how is your lesson planning? Blah 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 blah." I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. She's talking like and it was that same sort of care that that I sort of picked up from her. You know, more than like the individual lessons in Filipino, it was sort of that care that she gave to students. Funny thing, she was my 12th, 11th, 12th grade Filipino teacher. She was our colleague. She was Popet's first grade teacher.
Ah,
It's
Yeah.
wow.
so trippy. Like
Mind blown.
right one day Popet just goes up to me and like, "Oh, was Mrs. Laranas your teacher?" Right?
Mm.
Because I was like, "Yeah, yeah." And then I messaged Mrs. Laranas and I was like, "Oh, I'm colleagues with Popet." Right? And she's like, "Oh yeah, I remember him. He was a really good kid in the first grade." I'm like, "Whoa."
Right.
So that's like small world. Mr. Flynn was cool though. He was very fire and brimstone. Right? He was the guy that you could hear from the first floor when he was on the third floor telling a kid to line up. Right? So that's sort of where I got that. But the other thing that I got from Mr. Flynn that was really cool and I carry to this day, he was he was really fire and brimstone to the 11th graders, and he was so nice to the 12th graders. Right? So he was like, I because like he was like, "You made it past the 11th grade. This should be your trial by fire. You're in the
Ah,
12th grade. I assume that you know what you're doing. You guys are 18, blah 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 blah." And so he was like really nice to the 12th graders, but like everybody in the 11th grade was scared of him. And I think like well, when we had our physical class, that's kind of what I tried to do. Be the stern dude for grade 11. Then for like 12th grade, yeah, what's up? Right? With college, completely different story. My favorite teachers in college were the really nice ones. Um, we had this we had this philosophy teacher named Eric Portugal. Um, I really loved his style. He forbade us to take notes. He was like, "You cannot take notes in this class because I want this class to be a conversation."
ah,
Right? So it was the philosophy of work and society. So it's pretty much like Catholic social teachings, pretending to be a
ah.
philosophy class. But um, yeah, his rule was you can't take notes in my class because this class is going to be a conversation about ideas.
Yeah.
And so he would throw ideas to the class. And instead of 80% listening, 20% copying, he wanted us to be 100% listening to everything and everybody that was going on in class. And then, like the week or two before exams, he'd just give us notes,
Mm.
Oh.
right? He was like, "All right, here you go. This is the notes for what we were supposed to have talked about over the course of the semester, and that's what we would study for the test, along with the discussions that we had in class." Um, I really wish I could do that for high school, but no, you have to teach them how to take notes. But I distinctly remember that, and when it came to making modules, the reason I was able to get through most of it was because I started doing what Portugal did with my students last year. I started making notes for each lesson,
Mm.
right? So sort of, well, I guess a rudimentary textbook, of some
Ah.
kind, right? And then just gave it out to them as exams were coming up,
Mm-mm.
as if to just to sort of do the thing that Mr. Portugal did for us. Um, but like you could tell, he was brilliant. He was always available to hang out. Again, college teacher, right? Like he that sort of thing. Um, we actually loved him so much. We invited him to like our graduation party.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Um, and because we were much younger, we had a lot of red horse. Yeah. And then Eric, being like the old man that he is and being the fairly successful in business person that he is, so like teaching was just passion for him.
Mm.
He came in with like 2 cases of Qingdao beer, right?
The
Which is like
Chinese.
it was like a Chinese beer. It's like really light. And so like we were there with all of our red horse, and then we saw him there with like this fairly expensive Chinese beer, Qingdao. But that stuff is like really light. And so we were like, yeah, okay, we'll have our red horse. And so he was just there with his Qingdao. Mhm. But yeah, another thing that I love about him, this was the a guy that you could sort of see the experience in his eyes, no? As a philosophy teacher talking about the philosophy of work in society. You probably need somebody that's lived a nice sort of full life, and this guy had a wealth of experience. Um, talking about being an employee, being an employer, being a father. He he brought a lot of that into his teaching,
Yeah.
and you could tell that this depth of experience was something that he brought to the table and was something that I really appreciated. And the other super nice teacher in college was a guy named Dr. Grillo, Ernie Grillo. Amazing, amazing teacher. He taught us pedagogy and the teaching of history. So I had 2 classes with this guy. And what I learned from him was all of the technical stuff of teaching, like when you write on the whiteboard, you write like this and not like this. That way, you're
Ah.
not turning your back to the student.
Yeah.
Oh.
And if something is happening, you can easily look that way to make sure that kids aren't, messing with each other. He was the guy that taught us to. He was the guy that taught me to distribute papers not like that, by having the kids put papers to the back, but you go down the
Sideways.
side, and then they pass the papers to the side. That way, they're not smacking each other.
Mm.
I got that from him. How to make a grasp performance task, the principles of understanding by design. So all of that stuff I got from Dr. Grillo. But the thing that I really want to emulate from him, particularly now when it comes to online teaching, is just his control. Like like he's one of the most soft-spoken people that you will ever meet. But when he walks into a class, it's like he can control the class. He's one of those teachers.